There is a story, a powerful story, of a woman. She was driving by a church on a cold, miserable weekday afternoon, much like today and every day in upstate New York now until the end of winter. This woman was tired and she was overwhelmed by all the stress in her life. She hadn't been to Mass in decades. She wasn't really necessarily even looking for God on that day. But for some reason, something told her to turn into the parking lot and to go inside of the church. And so she did. And when she walked in the church, nobody was there. She was all alone. At first, she stayed near the back of the church, clutching her bag, looking around. What caught her attention was the stillness of the building. The noise of her life began to quiet. The light coming through the window softened everything. The space itself seemed to slow her breathing and calm her down. She noticed the baptismal font near the entrance. It made her think just for a moment of being a child, of her mother holding her, of something clean and hopeful that she hadn't felt in a long time. She eventually came in and sat down, and ahead of her she noticed the altar, solid, immovable, not flashy, just there. It gave her the strange sense that something in the world was stable and solid, even if her own life was not. And then she looked up and saw the crucifix, a real body, wounded, vulnerable, honest. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she thought to herself, if God knows suffering like that, maybe he knows mine. She stayed alone in the church for 5 minutes, then 10. The building itself did the preaching. Before she left, she lit a candle, not even sure why. She hadn't prayed in years. But as she went back out into the cold, something had shifted. She knew everything in her life was not yet fixed, but she also knew that she was no longer invisible. She was no longer alone. Later on, she came back to the church for Mass, then for confession, and eventually she entered OCIA, and she completed her Christian initiation. When people asked her, "What brought you back to the church?" her answer surprised them. She said, "I didn't come back because of a program. I didn't come back because of a homily. In my case, I came back because the church itself made room for me, and I met God there." The church itself made room for me, and I met God there. This is not an unusual story. In fact, in today's day and age, it's becoming more commonplace as people walk into churches and are struck by the beauty of the building and all that's about it and the presence of the Lord there. And the sentiment behind the story really captures the feeling behind this third Sunday of Advent. Father Butner said it's a different Sunday, signified by the rose vestments. It's called Gaudete Sunday. Gaudete is the Latin word that means rejoice. Why are we rejoicing? The prophet Isaiah tells us in our first reading, "Here is your God. He comes with vindication, with divine recompense. He comes to save you." Gaudete, rejoice. Why? Because Jesus tells us in today's gospel, in answer to the question of John the Baptist, he is the one who is to come. We don't have to look for another. Gaudete, rejoice, because God has come. That's why now in this season of Advent, from the third to the fourth Sunday, we are getting ready to welcome his coming anew at Christmas. God has already become one with us. And because of his incarnation, his taking on flesh, our humanity, because of this, we can meet him in and through his church. In the beauty and splendor of the building, in the liturgy and the sacraments that are celebrated here, in the good news that is proclaimed and lived here, and in our community that gathers here and is sent forth from here to serve. Gaudete, rejoice, because the church makes room for all of us, and we meet God here. My friends, that's why it's so important that today we begin the second action, major action of our strategic plan, which is to renew our facilities for mission. We are now a parish on mission. Our State of the Parish report revealed that. Our strategic plan for the next 5 to 7 years is centered on being a parish on mission, and the first action of that plan we started last week, getting more involved in the mission of the church. The materials for all of these things are available at the Welcome Center and at the exits on the sides of the church. They look like this. If you missed out on it or you're visiting us, I encourage you, take them all today. There's a lot of them. People say we're getting something every week when we come to Mass. I assure you after this weekend we're going to enter the quiet of Advent into Christmas and focus on that. But it's exciting of all the things that are going on here. And so today you received another handout for the second major action of our plan, and the information on it was put together by our staff and members of our strategic planning committee and professionals that we engaged to identify areas of concern and suggest possibilities for our facilities here at Sacred Heart and at Divine Mercy. So at this time, go ahead and take out that handout. And if you go ahead and open it up so that it's flat like this, we're going to start on the side that says Sacred Heart. You can see some words on the right and some pictures on the left. This church was built in 1964, and nearly 30 years later, to prepare for the next generation, the Family Center was added in 1992. And now, just more than 30 years later, it's our turn to address important needs for our facilities for the next generation. You can see some of those areas on the right-hand side: accessibility, functionality, hospitality, beauty, safety, efficiency. I just want to highlight a few things. First of all, the elevator to our parish hall is rather old, and it frequently breaks down. It did during one of our last senior luncheons, which you can imagine the struggle that brought. The number and locations of the restrooms that we have here is also lacking, given the large number of people we have at this Mass. There are no restrooms on the side sections here. Everybody has to funnel out to the one set of restrooms in the main entrance. Certain things are difficult to find, especially for visitors, like access to the parish hall. We have to sort of mark that when people come in with signs, and the confessionals. People who come here who are not necessarily from Sacred Heart that want to go to confession on Tuesdays and other times, we have to put up signage to point out where all the confessionals are. The many stairs that go to the altar, and then there's another set of stairs for the ambo, it makes it difficult for our ministers and our clergy to navigate. Father Butner and I are okay so far because we're on the younger side of the clergy. But as we recognize the aging clergy and ourselves sometimes, it can be difficult to go up and down all of these things in different levels in the one sanctuary that we have. Certain systems in our church are at the end of their useful life or beyond it. For example, our air conditioning is hanging on by a thread, and last summer the air conditioning for the other section of our facilities broke, and we replaced that, but it did take a while to be able to do that. And the lighting that we have in the church is supposed to have many functions, but only 2 or 3 work, pretty much on and off at this point, and that's also holding on. More importantly, the biggest area of concern is our windowed walls here. They have deteriorated significantly. Certain areas, if you push on them, which I don't encourage you to do, if you push on them, we're worried that they might, in fact, break out. So professionals came in and they've told us that given our climate and the need to replace them, we should do insulated walls and windows, again, because our air conditioning heat just goes simply out of them, and it's hard to heat and cool the building at different times. So if that's done and we replace those, then the whole architectural interior has changed because it all sort of goes together now. And that's why we engaged some architects who specialize in church interiors, and they came up with the concepts that you see on the left-hand side of the page there. Now, just a word of caution, they are just concepts. They're not plans that have been developed. They are possibilities given work that we have to do, and then the domino effect that begins to create of other work that needs to be done. So you can see it on the pictures. There's a cohesive style. They used the beautiful vaulted ceilings and beams that we have and preserve that, trying to get the height in there with the window design that they have and the altar and things like that. There's an accessible sanctuary layout, so once you enter the sanctuary via steps or there's a ramp behind the back, then you're on one level from the altar to the ambo to the chair. There's a focused entrance, centrally located confessionals, again, so people can know where they are, and we can greet people, and there are a lot of different ways to get in and out now that makes that difficult. There are additional restrooms that are not pictured on each side of the church here, and there's better lighting and so on, and much more to say, but this is just the beginning of this major action, so some ideas that are out there. So that's Sacred Heart. So now if you turn over to the other side, you will see Divine Mercy. And that looks like this. Again, if you hold it open all at one time, you can see the whole thing together. So Divine Mercy was built 10 years ago in 2016. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary there. The interior of the church was never really finished. Certain areas have to be addressed there, like beauty, functionality, hospitality, and efficiency. And again, I want to highlight just a few things there. There's a concrete floor that's there that was meant to be temporary, which is now 10 years old, and it's beginning to wear and crack. The walls and the ceiling are still the basic contractor-grade paint and materials. The sound system there was a lower-grade one that was installed, and now 10 years old, needs some work and needs some upgrades. The roofs need some work to address major ice buildup that's there, using gutters and heat tape and so on. And then the new rectory, which we've already started talking about in our strategic plan, we now own that, and now we need to begin the interior renovations to carry out that plan of accommodating more clergy and guests in one space and cutting down on costs of maintaining two different buildings. In order to finish the church, we engaged the same architects that looked at this one, and they came up with concepts on the left-hand side of the page. A new floor and ceiling, a cohesive interior style with some color, a focused entrance there as well, and some beautiful architectural elements, like the painting of the Divine Mercy, the namesake of the parish, right behind the tabernacle. So that's some of the work that we've been doing the past few months just to see, well, what will it take to renew our facilities for mission? What will that involve? So at this time, go ahead and put that handout away. You can read it later on today. I encourage you to do that. And I want to make a couple of comments. Once again, very important to know, the pictures are concepts. Last night at Divine Mercy, I heard someone say, oh, look at this is nice, they're going to do that there and that there. They're just concepts. We don't know yet. And that's why we want to hear from you. These are possibilities. So in January, there will be town hall meetings. We need parishioner participation to evaluate the situation. There's a lot more to be said about work that has to be done in both places. To examine the proposals that are out there, because we can't do it all at once, it would be overwhelming, and to engage the architects to see what their thinking was, given the buildings that we have, what works and what doesn't work. So again, stay tuned for those, and in the meantime, on the way out today, the people with the name tags that handed you these pamphlets would be happy to hear any questions or comments that they can write down, and then we can get back to us on that. Also, it's important, again, to get involved in the development of this important plan because we're all part of it together. It is something that you indicated to us is important to you when we did those strategic planning boards last year, and you could put the dots on the things that were important. When we did the Disciple Maker Index survey, you said we'd like to renew our facilities for mission. When we had meetings and conversations that came up over and over and again, and since I got here really 2 years ago, we've been talking about that. And so now is the time to begin that action, and we'd love to have your involvement in all of us doing this together. Again, there's so much to say and do about these exciting possibilities, but let's go back to the key spiritual principle that we heard today in our scripture readings and on this third Sunday of Advent. And that is, God comes to us. And there are so many ways we encounter God. One simple but beautiful and powerful way is just by walking into a church building that is welcoming and functional and efficient and accessible and safe and leads us deeper in our relationship with the Lord. And that's why the beautiful early churches of Christianity and the powerful ones were built so beautifully to allow that engagement. We are told by polls now that Christianity's on the rise again. And so it's our turn to make sure that our facilities are renewed for mission now and for generations to come. Because all of us, and whoever walks into our doors, should feel and experience what that woman in the story felt. The church is here for everyone, has made a space for everyone. And it's here that we encounter and meet the God who comes to save us.